Okay, so Chodesh Tov, first of all, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, it's Chodesh Adar now, so the one thing we have to focus on is Bi B'Simcha. Every Chabad yeshiva in the world, after Ma'ariv, every night, they dance. Dance, and they dance, and they dance. If you go to 770 Eastern Parkway, Chabad headquarters, tonight, they're dancing, like literally an hour, it's a dance party. For an hour and a half, they dance and dance and dance, and they love it when there's a double Adar, 60 days, because they dance for 60 days. This year it's only 30 days, so that's what's happening now. Despite the turmoil in the world, despite everything, we're happy and we're dancing. So it's been a really tough week for Am Yisrael. It's hostage after hostage after hostage, family after family after family. You know, I personally saw some of the funerals, the speeches, the eulogies of Yarden Bibas, his sister-in-law. I mean, heart-rendering. And you know, if you guys saw, but the story goes with Yarden. I'm not sure if he's a religious guy or not a religious guy. It's relevant, but when he was even in Hamas captivity, being abused and tormented in the hell of Gaza, underneath those tunnels, the Hamas terrorists asked him if he wants to convert to Islam. And they told him that if he converts, they will make his life much easier and make his conditions much easier. And he answered them, you guys saw this? He said, I was born a Jew, and I will die a Jew. And they starved him because of that for 2 days. You know, Yom Kippur fast, we don't eat for 24 hours. He did this for 48 hours. They didn't give him any food. They tortured him, tormented him. And it just goes to show you the depths of a Jewish soul. That it doesn't matter if you keep Shabbat, you don't keep Shabbat. When push comes to shove, that neshama, that soul, shines in all its glory. It's like so powerful. And that's part of what I want to talk about tonight. So I want to go tonight, share with you fascinating story behind the Megilla, the story behind the story. Right? So just to recap, we all know that Achashverosh made a feast for 180 days, and then during the feast, he had his wife Vashti killed, and then Queen Esther came onto the scene, and then Mordechai asked Esther to save the Jews because there was a decree against the Jews. And then Esther saved the day. That's the story. But let's just delve for a moment into this. When Mordechai came to Esther and he's told her to save the Jews, she says, I can't, it's too difficult. And then Mordechai told her, you know, you better do it. Whatever. He convinced her, she went to do it. What did she tell her husband Achashverosh? What did she tell him? She said to him, when she came into his, chamber, and she hadn't been there for 30 days, she was terrified of his reaction of what he would do. He asked her, what is your request? Does anybody remember? What did she say? What is your request? The words in the Megillah are, Yavo HaMelech veHaman Hayom. The king and Haman should come to a meal that I'm doing for you. And that is equivalent to imagine you are a real estate broker. Hi. You're a real estate broker. And you are trying to get an exclusive for a brand new building. So you'll call up the landlord, the owner, and you'll say, hi, this is Jack so-and-so. Hi, Jack, what do you want? I'd like to invite you to a lunch in Reserve Cut. The brand new Reserve Cut on 56th Street. I was there last night. It's amazing. Brand new. It's really good. I'd like to invite you. And at the lunch, after you've ordered your steak, and after the guy's drunk wine, he will ask you, Mr. Jack, what do you want? And you will say, do you mind if I get the exclusive for the apartment building? And the guy will hopefully say yes if he likes you, correct? That's how a normal transaction is done. So that's what Esther did over here. Esther went, she asked the king, come to my feast. At the feast, the king is there, Haman is there, Esther is there. They are whining, they are dining, they are drinking, they're having a great time. And at the feast, Achashverosh asked his wife, my dear, beautiful wife, who I love and adore so much, what do you want? And what does she say? Anyone remember? Very good. She says, my dear husband, I want to invite you tomorrow night to another feast. And at the second feast, Haman is there, Achashverosh is there. And Achashverosh asks Esther, my beautiful wife, I'll give you half the kingdom. What do you want? And Esther says, I want you to save my people. Your people? You don't want me to save them? What happened? This guy here, Haman, he wants to annihilate my people. And Achashverosh gets so angry that he decides to hang Haman on a tree. That is the story of Purim. Right? Simple. What's the question I'm going to ask you? Imagine that broker, Jack, is sitting with that guy, the landlord, for lunch at Reserve Cuts. And he's got a steak, and he's got wine, and the landlord will ask Jack, hey Jack, what do you want? And Jack will say, what I want? I want to invite you to lunch tomorrow, and I'll tell you what I want. And if the landlord, is a normal guy, he was busy, he'll say, hey, Mr. Jack, tell me now, what do you want? And he'll actually get annoyed if you'll invite him again tomorrow. I mean, if you want to invite him again tomorrow, fine, but I'm saying he'll actually get annoyed. It will actually work counter-effectively. It is very effective to invite somebody for lunch once if you want something from him, but it's very not effective to invite them a second date unless you're dating a girl and you want to, right? Then you want to wine her and dine her, and like guys should take care of their wives and spouses and girls they are dating, right? But that's an except. But if you want a business transaction, it will be counter-effective to invite them to another meal. So why on earth did Esther invite Achashverosh to a second meal? Why? Doesn't make sense. Right? Everybody with me so far? It is here that you will witness Esther's brilliance. She was one of the most brilliant women in history. A brilliant strategist who was tasked with an impossible mission, who rose to the occasion in flying colors and went way and above, succeeded when nobody could do it. It is the secret of the two meals. And here I'm going to take you behind the scenes. You have a movie and then you go behind the scenes, you watch the actors. Here I will show you Esther's brilliance woven into the Megillah in the most incredible way. So let's take a look. Mordechai tells Esther, we have a problem. I overheard that there's a plot that Haman wants to annihilate every single Jew. This is something that not even Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, could do. Because Haman ruled over 127 countries. Every single Jew in the universe was under his dominion. There was nobody to run to. And Haman wanted it done in one day. Hitler couldn't do it. Pharaoh couldn't do it. None of our arch enemies, nobody, Hamas would try, they couldn't do it. Haman was the only one. It was the threat of annihilation in one day. It was the greatest threat to ever face our nation. Greatest threat. So Mordechai tells Esther, I want you to go speak to your husband, the king. And Esther says, it's impossible. It's impossible because the king has a rule that only if he invites you to his chamber can you come. But if he doesn't invite you, you're not welcome. And he can kill you. He has a scepter. If he gives you a golden scepter, it's good. If he gives you other scepter, he kills you. And this guy is prone to killing his wives. He killed his first one. What's stopping him from killing the second one? So then Mordechai has to do reverse psychology on his wife. And he tells her the famous words. I mentioned this in the shir last week. He tells her, Ki machareish tachrishi, because if you are silent at this time, sometimes in life we cannot be silent. The silence in the world is deafening when it comes to the women and the children and the men who are abused and raped and violated and tortured and kidnapped. The silence is deafening. Mordechai tells her, if you are silent at this time, salvation will come from another place. God will help us. We don't need you. That's what I tell people when I want to fundraise for them, right? I want to fundraise. I want them to sponsor a Torah class or a Kiddush or a leg for a soldier. I tell them, we don't need you. We're offering you the privilege, the opportunity to sponsor a Torah class, the opportunity to sponsor a leg for a soldier. But if you don't want to do it, we'll find somebody else. It's okay. But the merit will be lost upon you, which is exactly the words Mordechai tells Esther. And she's convinced. As I explained this in last week's Torah class, she's convinced. Now, Esther thinks. She analyzes her husband Achashverosh. She puts him on a couch, psychoanalyzes him, and then she analyzes Haman. She realizes, she understands what the weakness of each one is. She plays one weakness against the other in the most brilliant, cunning way possible. But the first thing she does, before any of this happens, she says to her husband, to Mordechai, Lech go kenoises kol hayudim, gather all the Jews and fast and pray, because she knows in order to be successful in life, you cannot do anything without Hashem, without praying. You want a shidduch, you want to find a spouse, you go and pray. You want to find a job, you go and you pray. If God can feed every single animal in the world, He can feed you. If He can provide a living for all the ants, all the billions of ants roaming planet Earth, He gives them their food, He can provide your parnassa as well. Your livelihood, He can provide. Just need to pray.
I have a quick question. Does the fasting have to do with like sacrifice to Hashem? Is that what they mean by that?
So in the olden days, when our bodies were stronger, the way of getting close to Hashem, the way of repenting, was fasting. In today's day and age, the Alter Rebbe wrote this already, the Rebbe writes letters about it, we don't fast because our bodies are weak, and when we fast, we won't be able to do anything but lie in our beds and do I don't know what. So instead of fasting, what you do is you give charity. And every single person has to give charity. 10% up to 20% of your earnings after taxes, before you pay any other bills, have to go to charity. It doesn't matter which charity it is, as long as it's a Jewish charity, it's called tzedakah. So the first thing she does is she gathers all the Jews. And it's the only time in history, note, the only time in history that all the Jews listened. Every single Jew. In the times of the Egyptians, how many Jews listened? 1/5. 80% said to Moses, dude, you could take the Jews to Israel. We ain't going with you nowhere. We're staying here. And because of that, during the plague of darkness, 80% of Jews died. And if you make the calculation, it's about 8 million Jews. More Jews than died in the Holocaust died during the plague, during those 3 days of the plague of darkness. Boom. And even the 20% who did stay with Moses, they were grumpy, they kvetched. Right, when it came to splitting of the sea, some of them said, let's go back to Egypt. Some of them said, let's commit suicide, thank you. Some of them said, so many Jews, even the 20% didn't listen. If you look today, while the Bibas family was being brought back, and we discovered that they were butchered and murdered and tortured by these monsters, they're not even human beings, these Hamas people. While that was happening, there were Jews protesting against the IDF striking the innocent Palestinians. Not like crazy. We Jews are a crazy nation. We're cuckoo. How are you protesting while this is happening? It's just we're a strange nation. It's also part of our strength, but we're a strange people. But during the times of Esther, every single Jew joined her in prayer. The Reform, the Conservative, the Orthodox, the Haredi, the non-Haredi, the Chabad, the non-Chabad, everybody. It was something unique. You see, the neshama, the soul, when you push it and push it and push, it's like an elastic, it rebounds back. And it rebounded back strongly. And this is what I mentioned in the beginning of the Torah class. Yarden Bibas is faced with an option to convert to Islam. And he says, I was born a Jew, I will die a Jew. That's so powerful. So, getting back to Esther.
So Hamas, how barbaric that they are. They're even worse than the Nazis, because at least during World War II, we heard stories of like a Schindler's List where the Germans would save some Jews, but there's not even a story of any Palestinian even saving any Jew. That's right. Just shows how barbaric.
No Palestinian tried to even save a Jew. Yeah. Not only that, but at least Germans try to hide their atrocities. Hamas are putting it live on Facebook and Telegram, and the world doesn't care. It's crazy. It's insane. But getting back to Esther. So the first thing she does is she prays. Any cry. When I was personally looking for a shidduch, for a spouse, I was dating for about a year, and that is like, dude, what's wrong with you? Dating for a year? Like, what are you indecisive? I was, by the way, I was quite indecisive. After I got married to my wife, I became Mr. Decisive, but I was very, very indecisive. And I used to walk around, should I marry her? Shouldn't I marry her? Should I? Shouldn't I? Should I? Shouldn't I? But the first thing I did, I went to pray. I went to the kotel, I went to the oil, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And even though it lasted an eternity, 1 year, I found her in the end. I found her, and when I found her, I jumped in and I married her. But no matter what crisis you are facing, first thing you do is you pray. This past Sunday morning, I had a big decision to make about something here in the Upper East Side. So I went Sunday morning, I went to the Ohel, 25 minutes, 5 a.m. I went there, went to the mikveh, then I prayed for guidance, for clarity, and I feel I get the answer, I get the response. So this is what Esther taught us. First thing is you do, you pray. Afterwards, she makes a plan, and here's her plan, listen carefully. So Esther analyzed Achashverosh. She says to herself, who was Achashverosh? What was his occupation before he became king? Anybody remember?
The animals.
He was Mr. Stable Boy. He used to clean the horses. There was a king of Persia, and it wasn't Achashverosh, and it wasn't Achashverosh's father, but Achashverosh worked for that king. He was a stable boy. He was Mr. Nobody. And one day, the daughter of that king comes across the stable boy, the worker, and she fell in love with him, and her name was Vashti. So when the king died, by the way, the king told his daughter, don't marry that good for nothing, don't marry him. And he was right, because Achashverosh had her killed. But he married her. She fell in love with him. And when her father died, she became queen. But because she became queen, he became king as well. Achashverosh made a rule. Nobody is allowed to enter my chamber unless I call upon him. What does that tell you about his character, about his personality? Paranoid. Achashverosh was paranoid. That's why he had his wife killed. What happened at the feast? Achashverosh says, everybody can do what they want, when they want, how they want. Vashtiya chadat einones. Einones means everybody can do what they want. So the king asked his wife Vashti to appear in front of him. So she said, what do you mean? I can do what I want, when I want, how I want. That's what she said. I'm not coming. She said, I'm not coming. So Achashverosh, even the crazy Achashverosh thought, oh my God, what's going to be now? What am I going to do? How am I going to get rid of her? I can't kill her because I said everybody can do what they want. But not the queen. So he calls together a session. He calls all his wise people at the feast. And he says, what should I do with my wife? And nobody knew what to tell him, because you said everybody can do what they want. So she can do what she wants. Until one Chacham, his name was Memuchan, he was Haman, he says to the king, if you let her go, if you let her off, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be a husband one day in Iran, and he's going to ask his wife to make him cholent, and she's going to say no. Kill Vashti now, so that that wife knows to obey her husband. There's going to be a wife one day in Turkey, and her husband's going to ask her to make him breakfast, and she's going to say no. The audacity, have Vashti killed now, so all women know that they have to obey their husbands. This was his advice. And Achashverosh listened. Great advice. Let me kill my wife, to teach all men a lesson, all women a lesson in the world. But the reason why he had her killed is because she told him, how dare you? You are summoning me? Who are you? You are a Mr. Nobody. I'm the queen. My father. I've got royal blood reigning in me. You're a nothing. You're a stable boy. She reminded him of that. He had her killed. Don't dare tell me. But he was paranoid, because since he came from nothing, he was paranoid all the time that somebody else who would come from nothing would usurp his power. because he had grabbed onto it by killing his wife, by marrying her and then killing her, he was paranoid somebody would do that to him. So Esther analyzed Achashverosh, and she realized this is his weak spot, his paranoia. Then she went to Haman, and she started analyzing Haman. Who was Haman? What was his weak spot? The what? Yes, his ego. His ego. Think about this. The Megilla tells us that Haman had everything in this world. He had 10 kids. He also had a daughter, by the way. He had power. He had fame. He had riches. Can you imagine somebody today? He's a billionaire. His children. He has a wife. He has a life. Can you imagine this guy being miserable? Listen to the words of the Megillah. One day, he goes out for a walk. And there's a rule that when he walks, he goes on his horse, everybody has to bow down, like bow down flat. And he goes and he meets Mordechai. And Mordechai refuses to bow down. He comes home and his wife asks him, "Hi Haman, how was your day?" And he says, "Miserable." Miserable? You made millions of dollars today. Every single person in the street bows down to you. The king has your attention. You're the most powerful person in the world after the king. Miserable? He says, yeah, because there's one Jew I met and that Jew refused to bow down to me. And in the words of the Megillah, V'chol zeh, and all this, everything I own, everything I possess, all the power and the fame that I have, einenu shoveli, is worth nothing to me. Who says that? Who says such a thing? The Gemara asks the question, the Talmud asks, Haman mina Torah mina. Where do we know Haman from the Torah? What the Talmud means is, where do we have such a crazy phenomenon like this? A guy who has everything in the world, every Jew in the world bows down to him. There's 15,999,999 people who bow down to him. Every Jew in the world, including every citizen, all the billions of people bow down to him. There's just one Jew. One Jew refuses. Everything is worth nothing to me. My children, my wife, my health, my family. It doesn't even make sense. The Talmud says, Haman mina Torah mina. Where do we know Haman from the Torah? Where does it say the word Haman in the Torah? Anybody know? Very good. Well, the story of Adam Harishon, the first man. It says, Adam was such a person. Adam was told by God, you can do what you want, when you want, how you want. You own the world. There wasn't a person. He was richer than Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos. All together, he was richer than them all. He owned the whole Manhattan. He owned the whole America. He owned the whole China. He owned the whole world. That's what he owned. And he was told you could do what you want, when you want, how you want. There's only one thing I'm asking of you. One thing. There's one tree amongst the millions of trees in the world. One tree that I don't want you to touch. That's the only thing I'm asking of you. Can you imagine living today as Jews? And you can eat all the shrimp and the lobster, the pork that you want. And you can violate all the Shabbat. You can be with all the women you want in the world. You can do whatever you want. One tree. One tree in Japan. One tree. Don't touch. All the apples and the oranges you could touch. One tree. And it took Adam how long to sin? Under 3 hours. He didn't even have time to taste the good stuff. Because the nature of a man is so powerful that he ate Sahara is so powerful. So he ate from the tree and God told him right after he ate, Adam Ayeka, where are you? And then he says, Hamin ha'etz, asher tziviticha le'echol mimeno chalta. Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to? The words Hamin in Hebrew, in the Torah, there's no spelling vowels. So Hamin, Hey Mem Nun, is the same letters as Haman. Says the Gemara, the Talmud, Adam and Haman had the same character traits. That they had everything they had in their lives, everything they wished for, and they were miserable. Because happiness doesn't come from owning a car and a Ferrari and a rich husband. Happiness comes from within. You could be a poverty-stricken pauper. You could be somebody who is ill. You could be in a concentration camp and you can be happy. Yarden Bibas was stripped from everything he had. His wife was murdered. His 2 children were ripped apart with the bare hands of the terrorists. He was alone in a dungeon, in a tunnel, no air, no food, nothing. His house was burnt down. His house was burnt down. He had no nothing. He has nothing. A guy, he owns nothing, nothing. He's in complete control of his tormentors. For 2 days, they didn't feed him. He came back like a concentration camp survivor. That's how he came back. When he walked out of captivity, he walked like a skeleton. And when they asked him to convert, he says, I am a Jew, I die as a Jew, because that's something they can't take away from him. It's an inner neshama. It's where the happiness comes from. Yes.
I also saw, I don't know if you saw on Instagram, Eli Sharabi, who was like very secular. He said he started saying the Shema twice a day, which is like so inspiring as like a Baal Tshuva who thinks I'm not doing enough ever. It's like sometimes that's all it takes.
A lot of these hostages came back with renewed faith. Keith, the American hostage, Keith, who just met Bibi Netanyahu today and his wife, Keith came back and they asked him, what do you want for Shabbat dinner? His first Shabbat dinner from captivity. They thought he'd say, one of the, nice, delicious food. He said, what I want is a kippah and a kiddush cup to make kiddush. That's what I want. And the girls, there was a video of the girls singing Shalom Aleichem in Arabic because they were terrified that the terrorists would hear them, so they sang in Arabic. Salam Aleichem, stories that we hear are stories of the soul. These are stories of the neshama. Happiness comes from within. If you are happy because you just landed a new job, that is not happiness. That is something external that happened to you, that today you have it and tomorrow you don't. If you are happy because you just got a new house, or because you just got a new dress or a new purse or a new bracelet or a new shirt, that is not happiness. Happiness comes from within. And that's something that Haman and Adam didn't realize. Haman had everything. He tells his wife, everything I have is worth nothing. That's crazy. So Esther analyzed the Achashverosh on the one side, who suffered from paranoia, extreme paranoia. And then she looks at Haman and she analyzes him and she sees a psychomaniac, egomaniac on steroids. And she says, let me play now one against the other. And she brought them down. She slaughtered them. Here's how she did it. He goes to Achashverosh and he tells her, my darling wife, I'll do anything for you. He really loved her. She was beautiful. And even though she fasted for 3 days, by the way, and fasting doesn't make you look good, right? She should have gone to a spa. She should have had 15 massages. She should have done her nails and her pedicures and manicures and everything else. But she didn't. She fasted and then she went to the king. And the king says, what do you want? And she says, I want to invite you to a meal. At the feast, Haman is there, Achashverosh is there. He says, what do you want? I want to invite you to another feast. There's one word in the Megilla that tells us this whole story that I'm about to share with you. I'm going to tell you the words and tell me what the word is. There's a difference between the invitation for the first meal versus the invitation for the second meal. Here's the wording. The Megillah says, when she invited them for the first meal, Achashverosh says, what do you want? Listen carefully to the Hebrew. Yavo Hamelech veHaman. May the king and Haman come. El Hamishteh Asher Asiti Lo. To the feast that I did for him. When she does the second feast, Yavo Hamelech veHaman El Hamishteh Asher Asiti Lahem. The king and Haman should come to the feast that I am doing for them. The word lo versus lahem. This one word, this one change sheds light on everything I'm about to share with you and that I have shared with you in the most brilliant way. So what happened is like this. She tells the king, first time she sees him, Achashverosh says, oh, my beautiful wife, what do you want? She says, I have a big problem. I need your help. What is it? What do you want? I want you to come to a feast. You and Haman. And I'll tell you at the feast. What does she do to the king when she tells him I have a big problem? She's feeding his paranoia. She's feeding his paranoia. She says, first thing, he says, what do you want? She says, I have a big problem. You tell somebody who's paranoid, I have a big problem. She's feeding his paranoia. She's feeding and feeding and feeding his paranoia. Okay. The king then comes with Haman to the feast, right? She's got wine there. She's got 15 courses of food. She's got waiters and waitresses coming over to give them wine. And at the feast, Esther is sitting next to Haman. And Achashverosh is sitting right over here. And she's laughing with Haman. She's talking with Haman. She's getting a little bit too close for comfort to Haman for the king. And the king's getting very nervous. Very, very nervous. And the king asks her, my dear beloved wife, I'll give you half the kingdom. What do you want? And she says to him, I have a big problem. Big problem. What is it? What do you want? I want you to come to a feast tomorrow night. But here's what she says. Yavo hamelech veHaman. The king and Haman should come to the feast that I'm doing for them. That one word for them is not lost on the king Achashverosh. One second. Yesterday you told me to come to this feast, and you told me it's for me. And Haman was like a tag along. Okay. But now are you inviting us? Whoa. What do you mean us? Who's us? It's me. And what does the king do when he exits that meal? What does the Megilla tell us? What happens to him that night?
The second and the first one.
After the first meal, what happened? Very good. The Megillah says, Balaylahu, that night, Nadedash, Natamelech, the king couldn't sleep. Why couldn't he sleep? Because Esther fed him paranoia. She fed his paranoia, and the king couldn't sleep. What's going on? What does she want? What does she want? And here's what happens. You see, the only person until that moment who had access to the king's ear was Haman. The only person who didn't have to be summoned by the king was Haman. Haman knew about the king's weakness. He knew the king was paranoid. So he kept on feeding him conspiracy theories. Feeding him conspiracy theories and this guy wants to kill you, that guy wants to kill you. And so Haman had the ear of the king. Haman could do what he wants when he wants. That's how he became so powerful. By the way, Stalin had a trusted lieutenant by the name of Beria, who was like this. Stalin, by the way, you know how Stalin died? Anybody know? What year did Stalin die?
52.
51 or 52, yeah. The Rebbe killed him. Did you know that? The Lubavitcher Rebbe killed him.
Wow.
Stalin, there was at that time, there was the doctor's plot, right? There was a plan. Stalin, by the way, killed a lot more people than Hitler. Stalin was an evil person. And Stalin concocted this doctor's plot to kill the Jews, basically. He basically arrested Jews, and he said, oh, they want to kill all these Russians, right, diplomats, and he had concentration camps ready lined up for all the Jews. He was going to put them on trial, find them guilty, and then say, oh, Jews, for your safety, we have to move you to these concentration camps. And he was going to kill all the Jews in Russia. That was his plan. And in 1951, it was on Purim night that he died. On Purim night, the Rebbe in New York gave a mimer. He gave a second mimer that night, a second talk, discourse, something that was very unusual, very uncharacteristic. And he spoke in that mimer, in that talk. And he gave the story, and he said there was once upon a time, there was a chassid. There was a student who, was oblivious to this world. He didn't read newspapers, didn't listen to the radio, so he didn't know about the local elections. But the Rebbe Rashab, his Rebbe told him, you have to vote. So he went, put on his hat and jacket, and he went to the mikveh, and he's fulfilling the Rebbe's instruction to go vote. And when he comes out of the voting station, he notices all the Russians saying, Hoorah, hooray! They were singing like hooray, 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 right? They were saying, they were like making a thing. And he thought, the Chassid thought they were saying hoorah. Hoorah means in Hebrew, he is bad. He didn't realize, he has no idea, hooray, he doesn't know what the slogan is. So hoorah. So the Rebbe is saying, hoorah, hoorah, meaning who's bad. And then the Rebbe gets up in the middle of the talk, he gets up and he says, hoorah, he is bad. 3 times over, hoorah, hoorah. And all the Hasidim realize something's happening here. Hoorah, he is bad, he's bad. And the whole time the Rebbe was talking about the evil people, the evil leaders who plot against us. And Purim is able to draw down God's mercy in a way that destroys, obliterates our enemies, like it happened with Haman, like it happened with all our enemies in history. And a few days later, right, Stalin's people try to hide this, but a few days later it was found out that Purim, he had a massive stroke and he died. So it was on Purim while the Rebbe was saying this talk about hoorah, he is bad, that's when Stalin died. So just so you know that you won't find that in Wikipedia, but here you will find that. So getting back to the story, so Haman knew about this weakness of the king of death, about this paranoia. He was very, very well aware of that. And so he used it to his advantage. But here, Esther fed him, and that's why he couldn't sleep that night. Now let's look at Haman. What did Esther do to Haman? During the feast, she's talking to him, she's laughing with him, she's feeding his ego. He comes home that night, his wife asks him, how was your day? Zeresh, ishto. And he says to her, these are the words, you won't believe it. You know what happened to me, he says to his wife? The queen made a feast. And you know who the only person invited in the universe? These are his words. The only person invited in the universe. Me. So he tells his wife, the words of the Megilla. Me, I'm the only. She fed his ego. She knew his weakness was his ego. She fed it. She fed it and she fed it until she is able to bury him, literally bury him. She fed his ego. So now, Haman also realized, right? Yavo HaMelech veHaman, Haman and Achashverosh should come to the feast that I'm doing for them. He realized the words for them. He realized the first meal he wasn't invited to, it was like a tag along. But now he realized, oh my God, she's inviting me too. She fed him, and he's like, feels so good. Wow. She completely disarmed him. He didn't realize that she was concocting a plot against him because she was feeding his ego. So she fed his paranoia, which is why he couldn't sleep, and she fed his ego. And then that night when he couldn't sleep, Haman came to Achashverosh. And that was the time that Achashverosh read the book of remembrances and he realized Mordechai was owed a favor. So when Achashverosh comes, when Haman comes, Achashverosh asks him, what should I do with the person that I like so much? And Haman thinks it's me. Who else would it be? Who else would the king want to do something great? So he tells the king, take a whole, he's like thinking, what's the biggest, greatest thing I would want? What's the greatest gift? Right? Imagine I ask any one of you, what's the greatest gift you want? Some of you will say a Ferrari. You know, one of the hostages got a gift this week from a donor, and she got a 300,000 shekel car. Right? Like that's a nice gift to somebody, right? Who spent a year in the hell of Gaza in the tunnels. Nice gift. Right? A Sefer Torah. Haman, what does he want? He says, take a horse and with fine clothing and dress this guy in something nice and walk around saying, so shall be done to the person who the king loves. Just think, the way the guy thinks, he's crazy. He's cuckoo, this guy. He's off his rocker. He's full of ego. So Haman, Achashverosh tells him, go do this to Mordechai. Anyway, they come the next night to the feast. And Achashverosh hasn't slept. He's being fed his paranoia. He's like, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And she's, again, and then Megilla builds it up. She says, I've got a big problem. What? What's your big problem? She says to him, I am being threatened. You are being threatened. She says, there's a coup. There's a coup! This is his greatest fear. This is exactly what he feared. There's a coup. Who? What? Who's trying? Who? What? She says slowly. The words are very, very slowly, emphatically coming out of her. She said, there's somebody who wants to destroy me and my nation. Me, your beloved wife. And the He's going crazy. He's plotting. You can literally hear the tension in the Megillah. What? Tell me. She's feeding his paranoia. And she says to him, there's a man responsible for this. Somebody wants to kill me. There's a coup going on under your nose. His worst fears materializing. He says, who? For God's sake, tell me who. And she says, Haman. And Haman was listening to this conversation. He in his wildest dreams, he couldn't believe that she's talking about him. What are you talking about? By the way, the answer to anti-Semitism, to Jew hatred, is right here. Because there was anti-Semitism going against the Jews, right? Her nation were being threatened. She didn't go to Washington and make a protest. She didn't scream. She didn't try to hide her Judaism. What she did was, to counter anti-Semitism, she says, I am Jewish. That's what she said, I am Jewish. Achashverosh is like, you are Jewish? You? That's how she solved the problem. She says, yes, I'm Jewish. We're not bad. I'm Jewish. Because people like proud Jews. You want to know the answer to anti-Semitism? Put on your yarmulke, put on your tzitzis, light Shabbat candles, keep Shabbat, dress like a proud Jew. Somebody was going to Paris today on the way to Israel yesterday, and he asked me, is it safe? I said, of course it's safe. Go wear your yarmulke proudly in Paris, by the Eiffel Tower. So the king is like, he's shaken. He goes outside like he just needs a coffee break, like he just needs a timeout because he's so angry. He could punch the walls, he could kill everybody around him. And Haman realizes he's in big trouble. Big trouble. So Esther's on a couch. He goes to beg by her feet. He lays down next to her and he's begging her, Esther, please. I'm in big trouble now because of you. Please, what can we do? And just then the king walks out and he says to Haman, do you also want to violate my wife? Do you want to steal her from me? This was her plan all along. She wanted to create a wedge, a gap between Haman and Achashverosh. The only person who had Achashverosh's ear was Haman. And she brilliantly, cunningly, deceptively wove a plan to make a gap between them. And now Achashverosh is accusing Haman of trying to take his wife away from him. That's exactly what she wanted from the beginning. She laid a trap. She put a pit in the ground. She buried Haman right there where she wanted him. And Achashverosh was so angry at this point. He says, and just at this point, Yom Charbona, which is an angel came and says, you know, Haman built a tree 50 amot high, 50 amot high, to bury, to hang Mordechai. The king says, take Haman and go bury him, go hang him right now, right there. That's what she wanted all along. The most brilliant plan in history. They can make a movie out of it. She shook the foundations. She shook everything. This is what she did. As Jews, we have suffered unbearable pain this week, this month, this year, the last 16 months, the last 2,000 years. We've suffered unbearable pain. And sometimes our challenges seem insurmountable. But we are like an olive. When you crush an olive, that's when it gives out its juice. Jews are like an olive. When you crush us, that is when we give out the best. The creme de la creme, the best of the best. That is when we give it out. I sent out an email this week. There's a soldier by the name of Imri. He served in the K9 unit. And he had a dog with him, part of the K9 unit. This dog saved them 17 times during this current war. And at one point, they were in a booby-trapped house in Khan Yunis. And when Hamas detonated the bomb, a wall fell down on top of him and injured his leg. And he has something called CRPS. CRPS is in unbearable pain. They call it suicide's illness because people who have this CRPS, they commit suicide. The pain is just too intense. And very often they'll amputate their limbs because the pain is just unbearable. So we flew him to New York because the doctors in Israel didn't have a response for this. And I was with him when the doctor said to him, examined him and said to him, We have a solution for this. We have a solution. And the solution is to do a specific kind of surgery that we do here. We take care of this. So I was listening, and Imri was listening, and Imri started to cry. I didn't cry. Why didn't I cry? I knew the information as well as he did, right? I understood the knowledge that there's a surgery that can help Imri. I understood it, but Imri started to cry. Why? Why did he cry?
First sign of relief.
But why did he cry? Why not me? He cried from happiness because he realized there's a solution to his problem. But why didn't I cry from happiness?
Because you don't relate it much. It's not yourself.
Because he feels the pain. He feels it. And because he feels it so much, when somebody tells him there's a solution to get out of this pain, he starts to cry from happiness. We are in darkness. What? He's scheduling the surgery in another month's time. So he will get better. We are in darkness. We are in exile. We are in so much pain. And the solution is, the surgery is Mashiach. Mashiach is going to come, take us out of this pain. We have to feel that happiness, that intense joy that comes because there's a solution to the tunnels of Gaza. And it's not Trump Gaza. That may be a temporary solution. It's not Trump Gaza. It's not transferring them, which is a great idea. We should transfer all the Arabs out. They don't belong there at all. But the solution is Mashiach. And the joy and the happiness that we experience has to be like Imri's happiness, because there's a solution to get out of there. And this is what we pray for and we yearn for every single day. And this is the beginning of happiness tonight, because Misha Nichnas Adar, Marbim Besimcha. As soon as Adar comes, we are increasing in joy. May Hashem help us that we all liberated from our troubles, from our worry, from our pain. We have an incredible 30 days of simcha, of joy, and we witness the ultimate joy of the coming of Mashiach right now.